I was going to start with you, Daniel, because I just wondered whether American horror films were something that kind of registered in your consciousness when you were growing up, or whether they were a big influence at all.
Well, I got terrified by horror movies very early on. I was 8 years old when I watched Psycho for the first time, and I never forgot it. And just the strength of horror, because it works on such a visceral level. And it's so cinematic because it works through light and shadows and what you don't show, and through the sounds of the music and kind of all the tools that you're using for a movie. A horror movie makes great use of, so I always loved that. But I'd never done a horror movie. So when the producers approached me and said, we want the style of your previous movie, but with a horror script, can you do horror? And I shouted, of course I can do horror. And I was going home and I was like, can I do horror? You know, it was was a little quick to agree to this. But then we had Eli Roth on board, who couldn't have been a better mentor and kind of guiding me through the process. And he's done it so many times, and he is such a master at it that I kind of felt very safe doing horror.
I was wondering as well about the documentary approach, whether that was something that was on the page, and how you felt about where the story was going while you were reading the script, both of you guys.
It was always written that way because the writer Andrew Gerland and Hak Butko are fake documentary filmmakers, and they had written it for themselves to direct, and then they ended up not directing it because they had committed to a different movie that they were contractually obligated to do. And I had made a fake documentary before, so I was very comfortable with the style, and I think that's the reason why I got hired, is the whole style. And I think in this case it really adds something, because what it does is it allows you to kind of tear down that fourth wall that makes the audience very protected, you know, and very kind of safe, and they're sitting in the dark and they're just observers. But if you tear that down and you have the actors stare into camera, suddenly it's much more uncomfortable because the audience is right in the story. You know, they're very aware that they're only seeing this little frame, but they're 360 degrees around them of a world that could attack them at any moment. So I think it's a really strong style for a horror movie because of that.
And what were your first thoughts on kind of reading the story, and did you know where it was going? And
I wasn't sure where it was going to go, to tell you the truth, but I'd seen Daniel's first film, and so I had an idea of at least the storytelling that he was capable of and how he would do it. And as an actor, I loved being able to use the lens as my scene partner. You know, that was really a tool that you usually don't get the leeway to do so. Matter of fact, I got so comfortable with it, a couple days into it, Daniel was reminding me, he goes, all right, enough with the looking in the lens. I'm like, but I have this great idea. He goes, yes, I know you have this great idea. Why don't you do the scene with the people you're doing the scene with, you know? And it was really fun. I got comfortable with doing it, and it felt great because it felt like we were this little unit going through the story with the cameraman and the sound woman. We got to go ahead and experience the whole thing together. And I think that's what the audience gets to do. They get to go ahead and be with us as part of like the camera unit going down to see. So when we get down to the Sweetser farm, the audience is like already in there with us.
And I understand that it was a closed set as well. And I was wondering why that was. I mean, did that drive everybody nuts?
Well, I think it does something to actors if you have 50 people behind the camera staring at them. All the intimacy is kind of out the window. And there are certain things that I just wanted to avoid that scream, create artifice now, like the slate, where it says, you know, this stuff. You don't want that, because then they're starting to act, and I didn't want them to act. I almost wanted to print a T-shirt that says "No acting allowed."
And I wanted to act. I really did.
Yeah, because that's what they're trained to do: act, create a character, create someone who's different from themselves. And I didn't want that. I wanted, and most of the actors, most of the characters are actually named by the real names of the actors, so that they have nothing to hide behind. You know, they can't create a separate persona, because then they're detached from their emotions. You really want them to be themselves in that situation, in that heat, with that smell, in that old plantation, and all that. And you get something from them when they're exhausted and angry because they want to go home, and they've done this 30 times, they don't want to do it again. That is just, it's not something that is in their head and they're trying to convey something, and it's this preconceived notion of what they want to bring across, but they are reacting to something, and you get very subtle nuances that way.
And did the character of Cotton evolve then while you were on the set? You know, was he quite different perhaps from when you first read it on the page?
Well, we got to shoot kind of in chronological order, which was great, because as I descend into my journey, I get to descend into my journey, and there was no hair and makeup, and I had like one suit. So as the shooting increased, my uncomfortability increased as well, and my sense of, you know, trying to figure out my solution in this problem, you know, became very palpable. So I'm in the farm, and we're like out in the middle of nowhere, and Nell is going crazy, and we're having the exorcism scenes. I'm really distraught. I'm genuinely creeped out, and I'm genuinely tired and exhausted and at my wit's end. So I think that comes across.
And what's been the reaction of the Christian right, I would say, in America? Because, I mean, obviously, you know, it's well known that the Christians over there can be a bit kind of uptight about it.
But then
It's a
again,
very vocal group.
but they love The Exorcist, for example. It's like the Vatican's favorite movie is The Exorcist because it shows you that we have to fight the devil and all that. And to us, it was important to make a very fair argument for both sides. We kind of send faith and we send science on their journey and make an as much as possible eloquent and intelligent and fair argument for both sides, and just have them clash and see what happens. So the movie doesn't really take a position and says this is what you should think about God, or this is right or this is wrong. And that was really important to us, because it would be a pretty arrogant endeavor to make a 90-minute movie and say we're now telling you if God exists or not. That's not what the movie's
Wait,
about.
we didn't do that?
We didn't. We cut that out.
we
That's a
didn't.
deleted scene where we
Man.
yeah.
So you haven't been punched in the street by sort of Christian Bible
Oh,
bashers
the
or anything?
opposite. They love it.
Yeah.
They really, really love it. They feel it's a faith-affirming movie, and that's kind of the funny thing, that non-believers think it's about something completely different, and believers think it's a faith-affirming movie. And I kind of love that, because it was important to me that we raise a question, but we don't answer it. We're not there to give the answer. We're there to raise the question and then have the audience fill in the gap and kind of take them as a smart audience and don't spoon-feed stuff to them.